Good afternoon, everybody that's here. Thank you for being here. I'm Walt Rogers, Deputy Director of TEF Iowa. TEF Iowa seeks policy solutions that help benefit all Iowans. This afternoon, we are releasing the economic impact of COVID-19 on the Iowa economy, a first cut. And in this series of reports, we examine the financial implications of the virus, authored by Dr. Ernie Goss and Mr. Scott Strain. The first report is based on a brief snapshot of the data currently available from the early days of the virus here in Iowa. The picture will become even more clear after April data is released later on this month. But we can already see that COVID-19 is impacting our state's economy in an incredible way, both in terms of wages and jobs lost to Iowans and of future government budgets. So it's important that we take a deep dive into the economic realities of this pandemic. For instance, in the first cut, we will reveal the projections of a total cost to the Iowa economy so far, as well as projections about lost tax revenue. TEF Iowa is proud to have these two noted economists, Dr. Ernie Goss and Mr. Scott Strain, here with us today. Join us. We're glad to have them join us in the discussion of findings of this first cut. Before I turn it over to Dr. Goss and Mr. Strain, if you have a question, just simply submit it in the Q&A section, and we'll get to them as quickly as we possibly can. Dr. Goss and Mr. Strain will give a quick, brief summary of the report, and then we'll take questions. Dr. Goss, good to have you here. We got to get you unmuted.
Am I muted?
You're good now.
Okay, sorry. Okay, am I there?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thanks, Walt. Thanks for all of you. Thanks for joining in. Scott and I would like to thank you, Walt Rogers, and certainly John Hendrickson and Dan for all the assistance from TEF. They bear no responsibility for anything that I may say wrong, which by the way, if I appear a bit disheveled, that's because I am. The background you see there is a picture of a photo that a friend of mine took from an Iowa farm. So I'm right nice. There with you today. Thanks to all of you. And first off, we're talking about a summary of our estimated economic impact of COVID-19 on Iowa. And we call it a first cut. Now, and I'm going to turn it over to Scott to talk about the impacts. I'll just provide an intro. Why a first cut? Well, you know, we talked about, is it a V-shaped recovery? In other words, a sharp downturn and a sharp upturn? Probably not. I went for a V to a U, a sharp downturn and move along the bottom and an upturn, to now I'm in a swoosh, a Nike swoosh, a sharp down and a gradual upturn, even despite all the federal money that's going in. So, but why first cut? Well, US BLS data, employment data, is only for about the second week, 15th of March. So you can't pick it up. There's really no data available that picks it up except the first-time claims for unemployment insurance, which we used as a basis for our estimate. So we had the first-time claims. By the way, first-time claims, and be forewarned that they represent only about 40 to 50% of the overall unemployed. In other words, not all workers qualify for unemployment insurance. Some wait and delay getting insurance and unemployment insurance. And finally, some just don't file, and some move out of the workforce. So it's about 40 to 50%. So in general, and Scott can be more specific, you take the insured unemployment rate, and you can almost double it for Iowa. That's during a recession. But first-time claims went from 22,000 on March 21st. March 21st, that is after the BLS's employment survey for the state of Iowa. Then we had on the 28th, we had 54,000 first-time claims. And then we went to 127,000 on April the 4th. Now these are first-time claims, and the insured unemployment went from 1.3% rate. Iowa's one of the lowest in the nation. Then we went to 3.1% on March the 28th. Then we went to 7.4 on April the 4th. Now, Iowa is now about 8.3% insured unemployment rate. Now, the insured unemployment rate is the number of workers drawing benefits, unemployment benefits, divided by the covered unemployment number of unemployed, number of employed that are covered. Now, the unemployment rate, which includes the insured and also the uninsured, that's divided by the labor force. So it's the insured plus the uninsured divided by the labor force for the unemployment rate. Now, we'll have a second cut about probably around May the 22nd. Now, why May the 22nd, or will be sometime after that? That's when the first get the first BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics report, which will tell us the unemployment rate for Iowa for the month of April. And now, again, that's a little bit old, and it is a survey, and it is a preliminary number, and that's on May the 22nd, and that'll come out for Iowa. And then we've put a caveat in the conclusion that this does not account for the Federal Reserve's massive stimulus and the U.S. government, U.S. Treasury's massive stimulus, which ultimately we will pick it up. It's just we're not picking it up right now. And I'll turn it over to Scott right now to go over the findings of our report.
Thank you, Ernie. What we found during the period from March 21st to April 11th is that Iowa lost approximately 243,000 jobs, lost wages a little over $500 million, self-employment income of about $74 million, and then the total impact to the state, and this includes the impact at all stages of production, $1.6 billion. So that's a total sales number. Go ahead and go to the next slide. We've given a breakdown of some of the state and local tax impact also. What we're expecting is a big impact, big hit, of course, to sales tax receipts at both state and local level. This, of course, is a result of the shutting down of retail establishment, food and beverage establishments, as well as just overall decline in economic activity. We would anticipate also income tax over this period of time to result in about a $26 million decline for the state of Iowa. In total, we're looking at, again, during this period of time, the impact to state and local tax coffers of about $112 million.
Well, I want to, sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt you guys, but I want to get
say,
questions because of
yeah, we can get some questions, but I mean, one of the questions I'm probably answering in advance is, what about the casinos? What about as all the viewers know, that's about 22%, the tax rate, that is. And interestingly, I just an aside, one of my very talented students we were working on looking at the impact or the tax collections, the state revenues from sports betting. And as everybody out there knows, Iowa embraced sports betting. I don't know if that's the right term, embrace, but in August. And so we were looking at that, and all of a sudden my project has been shut down for a while. So anyway, I'll turn it back to you, Walt. Sorry for that interruption. Thanks, Scott.
No problem. And I just like to let the press know again, if they're out there, just throw a question up in the Q&A. We'll get them answered as fast as we can. Let me start with this one. What are the critical macroeconomic measures to keep an eye on? Is there any anecdotal evidence that you are paying attention to?
Oh, absolutely. I would do an advertisement for Creighton's 2 monthly surveys. We do a survey of manufacturers in 9 states, and we do a survey of bank CEOs in rural areas of 10 states. Both surveys include Iowa. And those one of them comes out, the banker survey comes out the 3rd Thursday of the month. The manufacturing survey comes out the 1st business day. So keep an eye on that. Those both are at record low levels. So that's a macro trend. I'd also like to say that, and this is one I keep in my back pocket all the time. Look at the yield on the 10-year Treasury. That is a prime indicator of the risk and what's going on and it's out there instantaneously. Go to finance.yahoo.com. It's now at about, it ranges now between 0.6% and 0.7%. In other words, record lows. Now, what accounts for that? What accounts for it is the risk that investors, global investors, see out there. When they see risk, they move into these safe havens. Safe haven of gold, and the gold is not as good of a measure as that. That's how I see it. And also, but the 10-year Treasury, and treasuries across the board, but the 10-year is the best measure of that. Of course, unfortunately for we economists, well, I guess I shouldn't say we're the ones that do it, it's being influenced by the Federal Reserve and being driven down artificially low by the Federal Reserve. When that goes up there, watch out. The equity market, that would be the stock market, I'm a little concerned there. I think it's a little overpriced right now. I think there's too much optimism that there's going to be a sharp recovery. Now, some of that's being driven by the Facebook, what's called the FANG stocks, Facebook, Amazon,
right.
Google, and so on. But anything you want to throw in, Scott?
Well, I am keeping my eyes on the debt market. We just had a new issue of debt out there across the maturity spectrum. I think the issuance was about 14 or 15% larger than what the market anticipated, and yields in the 7, 10, and 30-year bonds reacted accordingly with yields going up. There was also a Treasury announcement this morning that a new 20-year bond is going to be offered. Those are things I would look at, and especially any type of debt that's backed by a revenue stream tied to real estate is what I'm keeping my eye on.
Certainly retail REITs.
Right.
All right, we got some more questions coming in. How should Iowa offset any loss after rainy day funds are used?
Grow the economy.
That's a tough one. I'll turn that one over to Scott.
Get back to work. Grow the economy.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned. I mean, I'm obviously not a medical person. My extent of my medical expertise is putting on a Band-Aid, but nonetheless, everything's seen. Now I'm complaining here, but everything is driven by the medical community and preventing the probability of any deaths, the likelihood. But unfortunately, as you know, in Iowa and this side of the country particularly, a lot of folks aren't going to seeking medical care. So some precautionary medical care is not being undertaken. So in fact, we may be saving lives from COVID-19, but we're losing lives from those individuals that aren't getting getting exams for breast cancer, getting exams for prostate cancer, all the colonoscopy. Those things are not being undertaken in our hospitals, particularly in this part of the country. That's Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, and Kansas. You're talking about rural hospitals that are taking it on the chin right now. They were already in some real economic, not where you want to be economically speaking.
That goes
the
one of my
paradox.
next questions.
Well,
Sorry.
I was going to say the paradox of this is when we look at the downdraft by industry is the huge job losses in offices of physicians, other healthcare practitioners, dentists, and that's all preventative healthcare that Dr. Goss was talking about that isn't being done.
Yeah, and I'd like to say also, there is the temptation to raise taxes or move and see where you can raise taxes. This is no time to be raising taxes. And unfortunately, property taxes in Iowa are already too high for the economic conditions, particularly on ag. Agriculture is not doing well, and obviously current crop prices, current livestock prices are putting, separate from COVID-19, are also intertwined. The ag sector is not doing well.
And that goes to my next question. I actually had a couple that specifically were asking about Iowa's rural economy.
Mhm.
And what are some of the specific things happening to Iowa's economy because of the ag sector right now?
You know, Walt, and Scott, just jump in anytime, but Scott, but Walt, we conducted our survey in the last survey of bank CEOs in rural areas of Iowa and 9 other states. The index moved, it ranges between 0 and 100. 50 is growth neutral, 100 is out of sight. 0 obviously is not good. We were at 12, about 12. It was a record low. And the bankers that are telling us that ag, and obviously I guess we don't need bankers to tell you this, and you don't need an economist to tell you this, the ag is in trouble with livestock prices not where they need to be, grain prices. And this extends, we're talking about 2 industries that are important to Iowa, manufacturing and ag, both connected to the global environment, global economy. And both in the global economy, it's not just the US economy, the global economy is suffering. Now, I hate to be a gloom and Scott may be gloom and doom here, but it's not looking good right now. And again, but we'll talk, hopefully we'll have a little time to talk about the glimmer of hope at the end of this webinar.
The next question, it kind of concerns that also, is what are your thoughts about the discussions in Congress right now covering some of these state losses with another 500 billion or even another trillion of pandemic spending?
Scott, you want to? I'll jump in on that one if you don't want to, Scott. I'm against it. I'll just put that one. In other words, it's a blue state, and Iowa's been a purple state, of course, and more certainly not a blue state, but it's a bailout for the overspending of California, Illinois, New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts and other state economies, state governments, state and local governments of overspending. Our Iowa and Nebraska and other states in this part of the country have been more restrained in the growth. Now, local spending has grown at an unsustainable pace, but that was because it was tracking ag income. When ag income began to take off in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, and then 15 it came down, and then we started moving lower. And property taxes were growing unsustainably high in that period of time. So I'm opposed to that. There are some needs, and those needs the president has discussed that some of those directly tied to COVID-19, not tied to other levels of spending, overspending. And Scott, you want to chime in on anything?
Well, I was just thinking of tying this back to the shape of the recovery when you were talking about a Nike swoosh. Right. I think we can all remember going back to the last recession where we, in some sectors, rebounded vigorously, but then we had a rumbling, stumbling recovery after that and very muted growth for an extended period of time. The shape of the recovery from the last recession was actually a square root.
Right, that's right.
And that's, I think we can learn a lot from that experience. How do we grow the economy? We don't overburden the economy with regulation. We don't overburden the economy with the government's hands all over everything. Let the private sector get back to work.
That's right.
So in essence,
we may owe a royalty payment to Nike, so maybe we better call the square root. We don't have to pay maybe Isaac Newton on that one. But, yeah.
Well, that seems to be the discussions of the next questions is what you were kind of alluding to is what should we do then? And what I'm hearing is, number one, don't raise taxes. Number two, the government should just get out of the way. Are those basically what I'm hearing from you guys?
Well, definitely not come in with a lot of regulations that result in unintended consequences. We have an experience already where the unemployment benefits have been increased by $600 or $600 plus per week, and that may create a disincentive for people to return to work.
Oh, it will. In other words, there are lots of folks out there, the CARES Act, some of the parts of it that are contradictory and work against each other. That would be the idea that a company has to retain the workers but how can you retain the workers when they're paid more to remain unemployed or go on unemployment than they get from working? And that was opposed by 4 senators. That would be Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, Senator Scott of South Carolina, Senator Scott of Florida, and there was one other senator, that name Sass, I'm not sure, of Nebraska, certainly.
Well, we wanted to keep this press briefing to kind of a short period, but I want to ask one last question to kind of close us out, and basically asking you both, what do you see on the horizon as far as hope? What's hopeful in what's taking place in the states and in the country for us?
Well, if I can start, we could not be in a better part of the best nation on the face of the earth. In other words, Iowa and this part of the country, you look ahead, there's a huge demand for our food, the farmers' food, and agriculture is very, very productive. So if we get some of the, now I hate to see the president raising trade barriers again. He's talking about raising barriers. That is no place to go. The Iowa farmer, no farmer on the face of the earth can compete with the farmers in this part of the country. Let's move aside. Let's get trade going again. That would be very important. But long term, food demand is growing, particularly in Asia. As much as China, I don't want to get into the politics of China, but they really need our food, and they will pay a premium, and that's good for us. And Scott, you want to?
No, I think that's a good point. The other thing is we voluntarily shut down our economy. We did not have the type of policy misfire or the type of exogenous shock that we've had to the system, say oil or something like that in the past. This is different, but each day the people that get up and go back to work, and as more and more people continue to go back to work, the economy is going to start growing. Now it may take 12 months, it may take 18 months, it may take 24 months for all those supply chains to recouple. But to me, I'm optimistic. We did not suddenly become less productive.
Right, and that's where the answer is productivity. I'd like to also say something for Iowa's alternative energy, and that would be wind. We definitely have an advantage in terms of wind and wind energy production. Ethanol is taking it on the chin with oil prices moving down into negative territory, now back up to $20 to $30 a barrel. That has been very tough on ethanol, and that transmits back to the farmer in terms of corn prices and also into soybean prices. So ethanol, I'm hopeful there going forward. And people say, well, what about those subsidies? Well, the subsidies aren't really there. It was a blending requirements. And I think we will remain with those blending requirements going forward. And that's good for the Nebraska, the Iowa. I'll put North Dakota, South Dakota, and Kansas in there as well.
Dr. Goss, Mr. Strain, I wanted to thank you both for your expertise, for coming on board for this press briefing. I wanted to let the press know that we'll have a full webinar and this report online at tefiowa.org, tefiowa.org. We'll